Hi, welcome to Box on the Box, Rock and Celluloid, Botbrack. I'm Edward Box, so my top 10 films of a given director today is Sam Peckinpah, the late great Sam Peckinpah. So one of the most influential filmmakers of all time, certainly on action cinema. I kind of feel, people or other directors just tend to pick up on his slow-mo violence and not the richer themes of his work. Very difficult man, alcohol problems, drug problems, always at war with Hollywood, and that harmed his reputation while he was alive. And often a victim of sort of studio cutting, certainly on Pacquiara and Billy the Kid and Major Dundee. So Major Dundee didn't make the cut, or The Deadly Companions, Convoy, or The Osterman Weekend. Those are some of his films. They're the films that didn't make the cut. The number 10 place one is not actually a great film, but just to get a top 10, it's weird. This film should have been really good. It's James Caan and Robert Duvall. It's The Killer Elite, about kind of CIA black op assassin type guys. But the action scenes are pretty lame in it. There's a bit of slow-mo. Khan gets some kind of shot in the kneecap at the start. It was the first time I kind of seen this in a film when I first saw this film. And he has to recover from his injuries, and he kind of does some martial arts training. And it's weird, that side of things, you think Peckinpah would have sort of developed that more. You feel there's another film waiting to get out here, but by this point, Peckinpah was quite heavy into his alcoholism and wasn't really on it. I think it was a reasonable success. Obviously, Khan was quite a big star at the time, but he's kind of forgotten about now. So kind of by default, that's my number 10. Major Dundee's just too heavily cut. The Deadly Companions is a fledgling first film. Osterman Weekend's actually quite good fun, but it just didn't feel very Peckinpah-ish. And of course, Convoy, we remember that for the big trucks and stuff, but it doesn't feel very Peckinpah-ish. So my number 9 choice is Ride the High Country. This is elegiac western with John McCrea and Randolph Scott. And this is one of the first films, it's his first really great film, but it's a film that will explore the sort of passing of the Old West. The same year as Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. When films are starting to look at, when the West is starting to pass and become more civilized, these are guys past their prime, kind of doing one last kind of mission. You can see films like Unforgiven, obviously Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Cable Hogue, which we'll come to, explore this wild bunch. What do these guys kind of do as things change? Hostiles, the most recent film, with Christian Bale, again, has that idea. What do gunfighters, what do Civil War veterans, when that's over, where do they go? What do they do when they've been, lived violent lives and been birthed in bloodshed, so to speak. But it's also about honour as well, and about men being men and staying true to their values of friendship, and having your fellow horse riders back, so to speak. It got great reviews when it came out. It won an award at Cannes, but kind of got buried by the studio. And in some ways, this is Peckinpah's. This will be his battles that he'll have. Number 8 choice is Ballad of Cable Hogue. This is Jason Robards. This is a kind of comedy western. There's not much violence in this at all, or gunplay. But again, Cable Hogue's a character who lives in the past. He's kind of an old school western guy. And it's just starting off the turn of the century, and the world's changing. He actually gets run over by, I think it's a motorcycle or maybe a vehicle at the end, and he dies because of his injuries, and that shows that the world's changing. And again, this is a Peckinpah theme that he'll explore. Number 7 choice is Junior Bonner. So this is his other Steve McQueen film. He does 2 films with Steve McQueen in the same year. Kind of a shame why McQueen and Peckinpah didn't do more. They had a big hit with one film. Obviously, that provided Peckinpah with a hit which he needed. But Steve McQueen's notoriously difficult. guy as well. But this is Junior Bonner. Like I say, he plays a rodeo rider again, going past his prime, goes back home. Just basically the plot is he's kind of sorting out his kind of family. What's the word I'm looking for? Family trials and tribulations, and his dad. He wants to go to Australia. Steve McQueen ends up riding the rodeo horse for a famous horse they have one last time. He wins it and gets enough money to pay for his dad's ticket at the end. And then obviously he's aware that that might be his last great ride, or his time's coming to an end. So it's kind of looking at the rodeo rider as a kind of reflection of the modern day cowboy. So someone who's still working with the horse, is still wearing the hat and the gear. And in that respect, time's moving on for him. Lovely slow-mo sequences with this, with the montages, the rodeo riding. So I mean that's Peckinpah's thing. Up to this, there's a little bit of slow-mo in The Killer Elite. Ride the High Country isn't any. Ballad of Cable Hogue, from what I remember, there's not really any. Junior Bonner, has it in, but this is Peckinpah's signature technique is using multiple camera speed footage. So 120 frames a second, will give you 5 times slower, 96 frames a second, 4 times slower, and 72 frames a second, 3 times slower. And this is what he used to shoot at. He had a camera running at 72, camera running at 96, camera running at 120. And these different speeds will be cut together with real time and stretch the action. And this is a hugely important technique for cinema, but particularly action sequences. So my number 6 choice, again, this is a film flop at the time. I would argue this is kind of maybe the most sort of kind of semi-autobiographical sort of Peckinpah film. It's Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. So basically Warren Oates plays a piano player. He's an alcoholic, gets in, hears that the mob want a job doing, or gets in, I forget the plot now, but he basically is elected to pick up the head of the character Alfredo Garcia and take it to the mob boss. I think the Alfredo Garcia has impregnated the mob boss's daughter, the Mexican drug lord. So quite ahead of his time. Again, you get so many films now with Mexican drug cartels. Peckinpah was really way ahead with the whole going into Mexico thing and using Mexico, the border, as a way of exploring, Americana and that relationship. So Warren Oates gets the head, he's carrying the head around in the film, and it gets gradually more rotten with flies, and he just drinks more. There's weird shit with Gig Young, and now what's the other actor? Just checking here, apologies. There's no cast list on this. So Gig Young and Robert Webber are both hitmen as well, and they're like homosexual lovers. There's a bit where I think the Gig Young character is killed, and then Robert Webber's really teary. Warren Oates, he also makes love to one of his exes, and she gets murdered, and that's like a really kind of emotional scene. He ends up burying her. This film, it's all about death. It's all about kind of nihilism. At the end, Oates just goes in and gives them the head, and then takes on the cartel, and it's all hell, dies in a hail of bullets in slow-mo in his car. It's just a bleak film. It's a real 70s cult film. I mean, I remember seeing it, and I just couldn't believe there was a film called Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, but it's just one of those films, once you've seen it, you'll watch it several times, and it lingers long in the memory. The number 5 choice is Peckinpah's one sort of surefire hit, and it's The Getaway. So this is his film with Steve McQueen and Ali MacGraw. So famously, obviously, McQueen's one of the biggest stars in the world at this point, off the back of Bullet in particular. Ali MacGraw and him will have an affair. This will become a cause celeb. She will leave her husband Robert Evans, the famous film producer, the head of Paramount Pictures. One of the first kind of big celebrity romances after Burton and Taylor. and actually Alan McGraw will kind of stop making films. This is a $3.3 million budget, box office US rattles $36.7 million. It's a big hit. If released it now, this would be grossing $200 million. It kind of reins in Peckinpah's kind of slow-mo bit. It's got a great opening sequence where he's in prison, and it's got like a montage sequence of him just doing a repetitive prison job. He gets out. In a couple of heist sequences, there's some slow-mo. There's a kind of car chase bit as well, with some cool slow-mo. But it's good. McQueen's cool. He's got the cool glasses. He wears a slick suit. I mean, when you watch things like Reservoir Dogs and other films where you get the kind of suited action guy, this is where it comes from. It's well paced. It's pretty exciting. The chemistry's good. It was poorly remade with Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger in 1994. But this Peckinpah managed to kind of stay on track and not fall out of the studio with this. Maybe didn't drink as much, and it gave him his one sort of surefire hit. That's my number 5 choice. My number 4 choice is one of his kind of butchered masterpieces. But when it got put back together properly, people realised it's one of the last great westerns. After this, you get The Outlaw Josie Wales, and then it's dead. And then you get Unforgiven. A lot of people actually like Tombstone. But it's kind of one of the last great westerns of the Western era, and it's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. So the proper cut of this is 115 minutes. I forget what it was butchered to. Probably, there was post-production controversy in releasing preview versions. So he obviously delivered his cut. Peckinpah often delivered bigger cuts. The studio would have butchered it, and then it's gone out a bit incomprehensible. But great performance by James Coburn. Coburn, in some ways, he kind of should have been in more cowboy films, because his lanky frame. When you think of cowboys, you think of like them, the kind of fit guys. They're out on the range, they're on the horse a lot. They probably don't eat that much. You got a lanky gunfighter, if you think about Gary Cooper, and even something like Woody from Toy Story, the way Woody is, that lanky frame, the way he's animated, it makes me think of Coburn in this. Chris Christopherson's really good. He's really well cast as Billy the Kid. There's a great bit where there's a big shootout, and some guy says, "Oh, Billy the Kid, he's killed this guy's killed that," and the guy goes, "You can see Billy the Kid in his sights," and he goes, "Oh, he's killed me too." Well, he sees his own death, and then Billy the Kid shoots him. Of course, it's in slow mo. It's actually edited by Roger Spottiswoode. This film, sorry, just itching. Roger Spottiswoode directed Tomorrow Never Dies and Under Fire. Quite an okay filmmaker, but he was a slick. There was actually got 5-6 editors on this, so this is over probably Peckinpah to shoot a lot of footage, and his films took a long time to edit. But his box office wasn't bad actually. $4.6 million budget, $11 million gross. It's very good. There's a great scene with Slim Pickens when he gets shot and he knows he's going to die, and he just goes down to the water, be alone. And again, this sort of mirrors the scene at the end of the Ride the High Country. So you get that in Peckinpah films, characters dying and contemplating death and heroic deaths. Again, this is a big influence on John Woo in my previous top films. This is with the heroic bloodshed genre. And great. Bob Dylan works really well in this. His songs for this film, work in underscoring. It's great, classic Western, real poetic. Ode to the old West, a top revisionist Western. My number 3 choice is really his last masterpiece. Against the Run of Play, he does Cross of Iron. By this point, he's in quite bad shape. His reputation's in tatters. I forget how this film was funded. Again, he teams up with Coburn, but he shoots action scenes in this where he's only got 3 tanks, and he manages to make that look like a whole Panzer Division. Really good music score, great cinematography by John Kekoulian. He actually shot Witchfinder General, the great classic film. Julius Epstein writes the script. He's a really kind of well-known writer. Really good. It's got Anglia Mad Productions, ITC. Lou Gray was involved in this. Again, a $6 million budget. It was just a flop. But I remember seeing this when I first saw this. It just kind of stuck in your mind. The slow-mo bits are great. But it's got loads of depth. There's a great bit where they come across some Russian female soldiers. And I've never seen that in a film before. And obviously, in Russia, obviously the females, kind of work inequality under communist Russia with the males, and there's a kind of rape bit which is kind of interestingly done. That kind of got copied in the film Fury, that ambiguity. Obviously there wasn't a rape in Fury, but there's that tension where there's a female character and are the soldiers going to do something. So that's Fury, the Brad Pitt, David, I've forgotten his second name, but the director, apologies. It's great. Coburn plays Sergeant Steiner. There's another Sergeant Steiner film with Richard Burton. I forget the name of it now. Breakthrough, that's it. So I think there must be some novels based on that character, or maybe this was like a sequel. I don't know. But really good. The end's brilliant with Maximilian Schell, who's a World War I veteran, but he's a Prussian officer. It looks like the class system. So you have the Prussian officer who's then become the Nazi, and then Coburn's character and his crew are basically jobbing soldiers. They've got caught up in this thing. Like the soldiers, the seamen in Das Boot. These guys aren't Nazis, they're just serving German infantrymen, and they're pretty cynical about the whole thing. Great climax, and Coburn's just laughing, and then the kids, singing comes on at the end. It's a brilliant film, one of the great World War II films. Awesome. Okay, so my number 2 choice might surprise you. It's actually The Wild Bunch. A lot of people think it's been number 1. One of the all-time great westerns, one of the most important films ever made in terms of film technique and grammar. Principally, we're talking about the climax, the massive slow-mo shootout, using the aforementioned multi-camera speed footage at the end. He holed up with his editor Lou Lombardo for 6 months editing this, and a lot of that would have been the final sequence. 145 minutes long, $6 million budget, $11 million gross, unreliable source. It kind of made some money, but not quite enough. This should have had loads of Oscar nominations, but again, he battled with the studio. Great music by Jerry Fielding, brilliant opening with the kids and the scorpion. Love that. Cast amazing. William Holland, Borgnine, Ryan, Emma O'Brien, Warren Oates, Ben Johnson. So good. So good with with aging actors, and Holden was never better than in this film. And kind of standing in for Peckinpah, Holden by this point was quite far into his own alcoholism, and just the jaded gunfight, the West changing. There's a great bit where they go to Mexico, and the Mexican army general, they've got the old, the modern, what was the modern motor car, then with a Gatling gun on the top, which would be used in World War One. Amazing. And these guys, they've got nowhere to go. So when the bunch finally, tool up at the end, and for their famous walk, there's that great shot. I love it. They have their guns, and then Ben Johnson kind of cocks his the opposite way and has it kind of over his 2 forearms. And I just love the symmetry of the shot. If you look at that shot, that walk, if you pause it at any moment, you've just got a great frame in there. And then they go off to die. It's a great bit where Ernest Borgnine laughs. He does that crazy cackle before, it all kicks off. It's great, this film, because the whole pacing of it, there's little bits of slow-mo, but it's just building to that climax. And so many films since this film often climax in battles or gunplay. If you think about the end of Saving Private Ryan, as well as a war film, obviously, but, numerous action films. But this is just something else. And then Robert Ryan comes along, and he's just kind of sat there because he's been chasing him. And then what I love about it, there's a lovely wind down scene where you see the carnage, everyone's dead. Then Ryan's just like, what the fuck has gone on here? And he sat down. I think Edmund O'Brien comes along. I'm just heading out with the lads, you know, do you want to come? And it's kind of almost like, well, what do I do now? You know, I've been tracking these guys. You know, I've been a gunfighter myself, and you can see him probably go off for another, you know, last hurrah. You know, these guys, they've just got nowhere to go. They've got no place in the modern world. Brilliant. Okay, so let's go back from my top 10. The Killer Elite, Ride the High Country, Ballad of Cable Hogue, Junior Bonner, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, The Getaway, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Crossovan, Wild Bunch. So my number one choice is Straw Dogs. So it would have been the bunch. I've been lucky enough to see the Wild Bunch at the pictures there. There was a thing called National Cinema Day back in the 90s, 96 it was. And yeah, I saw it for the princely sum of £1 on a big screen on an anniversary screening. But Straw Dogs was one of those video nasties. It was banned, so it had a hold. You know, I was always excited to see it, and then they showed it at a local art house cinema here in Newcastle called the Tyneside Cinema in 1990, and it instantly gripped me. And since then, I hadn't seen it for a while, what seemed like an eternity, and I went to the United States in 1998, apologies, and I got myself a video copy that would play on an NTS machine, or a machine that was NTSC compatible. They're quite interesting, those videos, actually, because they tended to wash the print out a bit. So when it converted into your machine, you know, you actually ended up with a more desaturated print, but it was really crystal clear. But I remember my video box had Banned in the UK on it, and the great picture of Dustin Hoffman with the shattered lens of his glass. Love Hoffman in this. This is peak Hoffman. You know, he's coming off the back of The Graduate and Midnight Cowboy. Ignore John and Mary if you have managed to check that on YouTube the other day. Not very good. Little Big Man, which was a big hit as well. Peckinpah is, you know, is in full grip of his faculties. Susan George is very effective. And it's got a great British cast. Ken Hutchinson is great on this. Apparently he went off drinking with Peckinpah one night in a storm. The farm they filmed up at. This was based on a book called The Siege of Trenches Farm. Mark Kermode did a really good documentary on this. He's a big fan. And it's filmed in a place called Sunbury in Cornwall. What's interesting is when you go there, it's so tiny. And that opening shot over the graveyard, I've been in the graveyard, you realise the camera lens, how it kind of widens the image and makes things bigger. You know, if you went there, it's so innocuous. But it's great. I mean, T.P. McKenna's really good in it. Peter Vaughan, David Warner. You know, you've got that Frankenstein's monster moment where he kills the girl by accident, mirroring the original Frankenstein film, and then the yokels descend on the farm, and Hoffman feels he has to defend his masculinity. The very interesting is Hoffman's playing a mathematician, he's an intellectual, but what really Peckinpah's exploring is that every man has violence in him, every man has a breaking point, a snapping point. And then Hoffman uses his nous, he uses intelligence to defend himself, where the yokels are just going in, you know, get pissed to kind of, you know, beat him up with their guns. But he's the great man trap sequence. Is Adele Henny gets blatted in that. I love that. I love the guy who's riding on the bike. He's got the little trike. He's brilliant. It's kind of like you know, kind of like Deliverance. You know, you don't want to come across the locals. $2.2 million budget, $8 million box office. It did quite well. 170-minute cut with 113 minutes edited out. So this is principally about the rape scene, or that, I don't know if that was edited out. The rape scene's very problematic. Basically, the Del Henny character starts having sex with Susan George, but it's rape. But then it's like she's starting to enjoy it because he's a former boyfriend. But it kind of then the Ken Hutchinson character comes in, and then he rapes her, he takes over, and you know, it kind of holds on her face. I think Susan George does amazingly well in this scene. But that's an accusation of Peckinpah films of misogyny, the way, you know, he treats women, you know, in a Wild Bunch, Ballad of Cable Hogue, you know, a little bit of prostitutes, and like a lot of male filmmakers, you know, there is streak of misogyny. So, but it's, you know, it's an interesting scene. Yeah. So this is it's one of my fave films. You know, it'd certainly be in my top 20, 25 films of all time. This. I love the character the title Straw Dogs. It's so ambiguous. Yeah, really well worth checking out. That's my number one Peckinpah film, and I hope you enjoyed that. So see you again soon. Cheers.